Hi everyone, we are back with another part of my 5-year channel anniversary, in which I am going to be reviewing a game that I have been poking fun at for years now. No, not that one. Not that one either. Wow, I didn't know the list was that long. Yes, okay, here we go. This one. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Also, before we get started, there's gonna be spoilers. A lot of spoilers, and given that this game involves time travel, yeah, a lot happens. So if you haven't played the game yet and don't want it to be spoiled, even though it's over a year old at this point, yeah, you've been warned. So yeah, let's dive right into Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity and see why I'm not the biggest fan of this game.
To start off with, I have seen so many people start by talking about the box art for 5 minutes for no reason at all. So here's the box art of the game. It looks good. Moving on.
To actually start though, let's talk about my history with this game. So this game was announced in like early September of 2020, at a time where I was very high on my passion for Nintendo and all of their games. And this was also a time when really the main two games I was playing were Breath of the Wild and Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, making the announcement of this game very exciting for me personally. In fact, I was planning on making a YouTube video just kind of, I guess you could say, briefly touching on what I was expecting from this game, but in large part what I was expecting was gameplay almost identical to Definitive Edition, just with Breath of the Wild elements and specifically characters. And I did not get that at all. A demo released in October of 2020 and I downloaded it day of. I was really excited to see what was going to be happening with this game. And that's where my disappointment immediately came into play. The demo for this game wasn't very good. To sum up the entire thing, the demo had some major frame rate problems, tons of poppin', and honestly the game didn't look very good. I played through the first mission pretty much immediately upon downloading the demo, and the demo came with the first 2 missions, and I did not play the second one because I was kinda scared to keep going. I figured most of the problems would be, gotten over by the time that the game actually released in November of 2020, but my concern only continued to grow for this game. So with that in mind, I did eventually beat the second level, and it was much better in terms of its performance than the first one, but I also didn't buy the game at launch, and this was for a few different reasons. One of which being that usually I only buy like 1 game a month, and I had already bought Miles Morales like a week beforehand. But second being that I was concerned, and I ended up getting the game instead for Christmas that year. And yeah, I played through the game within about 5 days and about 25 hours before finally beating it and starting to form my opinions on it. In which my opinions were: the demo was kind of misleading, but the game still wasn't all that great. So let's talk about why I feel this way, by first looking at gameplay. So this game actually is kind of fun in its gameplay, but not necessarily perfect. The gameplay is kind of similar in terms of its moveset to Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. Every character has a basic attack and a special attack, and you're able to combine them and create combos, as well as just mash things together in order to easily dominate the pretty weak enemies that you're going to be going up against as your very strong character. And this is usually done really well in Warriors games, and I'm kind of concerned for any Warriors game that has, done this incorrectly, but here it's done pretty well. My problem, though, with it is some characters are much more fun to play than others. There are a lot of characters in this game that just simply are not fun to play, and the fact that there are missions that are pretty much required to play as one specific character, it's kind of annoying, especially when there's only like 3 or 4 characters in this game that I actually like playing as. Link was who I almost always main just because his moveset is the most basic, and I'm usually pretty much a tone to preferring the most basic movesets, but I've played as many other characters before, and some of them are quite fun, but Link is usually who I played throughout this game. Overall, I would say that the gameplay is actually not that bad. My problem though is the game design, and this is where I'm going to start to kind of get into spoilers, by which I mean there are way too many bosses in this game. And I know so many people have used that criticism before, but the reason why they keep saying it is because it's ridiculously true. Every single mission has at least 3 boss fights, and not a single one of them I can recall being fun. Every single boss fight seems to me to have just the same identical way to beat the boss, which is dodge a few times, occasionally use a rune, and whenever you see the 6 triangles, spam as much as you possibly can, and then eventually just dodge away, and then spam, and then eventually press X, and just rinse and repeat for every single boss battle. It is not fun at all. Also, while a lot of the bosses do have different elements to them, they all kind of feel the same just because the combat never really changes. Like, occasionally you'll have to throw a bomb at a Talus instead of trying to freeze a Moblin. But that's the only major difference. All the bosses just have the same feeling of just attack, attack, attack. And honestly, this is a mentality that makes a lot of the missions feel like the exact same, especially when there's not a lot of variety and simple character differences to begin with. You will fight a lot of Taluses, a lot of Linnels, and a lot of Moblins. There's not a lot of variety here. Of course, you'll get different elements, and occasionally Guardians will be thrown into the mix. But when you only have 5 different types of major bosses and there's like 2 or 3 boss fights every mission, yes, there's a problem going on here. And this is especially pressing for the last few missions where it's pretty much just a bunch of boss fights. In fact, I think the last 2 missions have a grand total of 15 boss fights in total. Why? And again, not a single one of them is fun, making the ending to the game, from a story and gameplay perspective, not great. But I did just briefly touch on story, so maybe I should go there, though I also kinda don't want to. Whatever. Okay, here we go. The story of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is just okay. And for me, this is incredibly disappointing. While a lot of people really, I would say, unfairly hate on Breath of the Wild's story, I actually kind of liked it. It was a lot more subtle than many people realize, and the characters, well, not really expanded upon the best. The main 2 were the ones that I really wanted to see, and they both did a really good job in, well, pretty much portraying what I was hoping to see out of the game. In the game, it's pretty much the main focus, at least in the cutscenes, of Zelda. Zelda is the main character in Breath of the Wild, at least in the cutscenes. And this is because Link, well, kind of on his journey, has already completed it. He already has the Master Sword for most of the cutscenes, and it never really feels like the story is about him. In fact, instead, it's about Zelda, trying to find her powers and trying to be just like every other Zelda before her. Which is different because it's the complete opposite in every single Zelda game before this. I should know, I played almost all of them. And the thing that I kinda like about it is that the ending and pretty much the entire gameplay is you personally building up to your adventure. That's why none of the cutscenes are pretty much in present time, because they're all you experiencing the adventure. It's part of what makes Breath of the Wild so iconic for me. And Zelda appearing at the end to save the day would feel kind of cheap if they hadn't done so much to develop her character. And in a lot of ways, this is why I love the story of Breath of the Wild. Age of Calamity kind of throws this away, and I really don't like that. And honestly, the most offensive tones of this are pretty much when Age of Calamity just decides that Link's character development is already finished within the game. Which shouldn't be true. This should be the first time that we are technically introduced to Link, and if you want to try and build up his struggles, then do it naturally. We're shown many times in Breath of the Wild that Link did have his struggles, but at the same time he was a complete savage. And we're not really shown this in Age of Calamity, like, at all. Like, yeah, you're destroying giant hordes of enemies as Link, but all the other characters are doing it, so kind of feels a bit less special, I guess. It also doesn't help the fact that Link just kind of goes through the motions in this game. It doesn't really feel like there's any, like, silent struggle, like I feel like there should be, like there is in Breath of the Wild, or like there has been in past Zelda games. Instead, we get one of the most dull moments in the entire game, where Link finally pulls up the Master Sword. I don't know what in the world was going on with the developers in their mind, but they treated what I find to be one of the most iconic moments in video games, the pulling of the Master Sword, and they just kind of threw it in there as just another part of the story. Like, you guys gotta build up to this, and they failed to do this, and it really stood out to me as the turning point in the story that I was not appreciating. Because up to this point, I kind of like the story. They build up Zelda naturally as having a lot of struggles and not being able to access her powers, which is exactly what I was expecting. And also, they just build up the champions a lot more. You get a lot more character development for them, and they feel more like real characters in this game in comparison to what we have seen before, which is usually just 2 cutscenes per champion where they kind of just say generic stuff. I feel like Rivali especially got a lot more love in this game than what was shown before, and honestly that should go for all the champions, and I appreciate it. But it's also kind of concerning when they focus a bit too much on the champions and then fail to completely realize what Link and Zelda should be in this game. And here we go. Here we go into complete rant mode. So eventually, at a critical moment in this game, they decide to use time travel to their complete advantage, where the characters bring back the characters from Breath of the Wild who I guess are negative 100, whatever they were in Breath of the Wild now. But also, in this case, they meet with their champion counterparts, which I think is done pretty well, but the problem is there's not like a good cutscene of each of them like meeting their champion counterparts. Like, why is this not in the game? They kind of have one, but not at the same time. All of the characters should be able to have a cool moment, and it serves as more development, which we desperately needed for the champions in Breath of the Wild. But we also have to have a scene where Zelda's father, the king, is killed and then comes back from the dead. I get that they wanted to add another playable character, but this was honestly one of the laziest forms of writing I've ever seen. I really am not a big fan of fake out death scenes, so this wasn't built up to and just seemed off. It also doesn't help that Zelda just becomes full tyrant monarch at a point in this game. Like, I don't really think this fits her character to just gain her powers and then immediately want to become queen. Like, no, that's not how it works. In fact, in a lot of ways, she wants to help for peace and prosperity. And then the first scene that we see of her is her demanding her army together to try and march on the castle. No. This game also tries to have the sort of like Avengers Endgame style final battle, and it also doesn't really work. It also doesn't help that this final battle is filled to the brim with bosses and just extremely annoying enemies that really didn't make me have a great time. Honestly, all in all, the finality of this game is just that Breath of the Wild technically never happened, because time travel, I have no idea if they're confirming this as canon, but this is not how you make a story. As some people have said, like, yay, it's cool that we got a brand new story, but no one was asking for a brand new story. We wanted to see what happened in the prequel to Breath of the Wild. We didn't get that. We didn't get that at all. And yes, I know they wanted to do that because they can have a lot more models that they can have as fighters in the game, and that's kind of a pain trying to have so many new creations for a game like this. But that doesn't help me from thinking that this is kind of lazy at the same time. I don't know. I will say that the sort of ending cutscene making you realize, oh, now there's two different timelines, isn't necessarily bad, and I kind of like seeing Zelda just look out at Hyrule and prosperity. I wish that Breath of the Wild had a cool ending scene like this. But, yep, that's all I gotta say. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, on a gameplay perspective, can be a lot of fun. On a game design perspective, not so much. The story kind of has me waning, because a lot of it I do enjoy. A lot of it I also really, really hate. I don't feel like this game was really thought through as much as they wanted for it to be. It could have really, really, really turned out to be something special, but instead it's just another game that I put on my shelf and wish that I could forget about. I don't really know what I'm going to score this game though. After playing it, I originally thought I would give it an 8 out of 10, but over time I've also kind of thought maybe it deserves just a simple 3 out of 10. But honestly, thinking about it right now, I think my score for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, let's say a 6 out of 10.